Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes live updates. Netanyahu says Israel will have overall security responsibility in Gaza after war. Letters from 7 years war open 250 years later. Hungary and Poland seize the EV moment. Tesla to raise Model Y prices in China following style revamp. A handsome boy from Australia, an invite for the president and a refusal to budge on some issues. The key takeaways from Albanese's China visit. Live updates. Netanyahu says Israel will have overall security responsibility in Gaza after war. Associated Press. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that Israel will maintain overall security responsibility in Gaza for an indefinite period after its war with Hamas. He also expressed a willingness to consider tactical little pauses in fighting to facilitate the release of hostages. This indicates that Israel plans to retain control over Gaza, which is home to around 2.3 million Palestinians. However, Netanyahu ruled out a general ceasefire without the release of the more than 240 hostages that Hamas took in its October 7 raid. U.S. President Joe Biden raised the need for humanitarian pauses in a call with Netanyahu, but no agreement was reached. Letters from 7 years war open 250 years later. BBC. Letters written in 1757-8 by loved ones of French sailors on board a warship, which were confiscated by the British Royal Navy during the 7 Years' War, have been opened for the first time. The letters were discovered by Professor Renaud Morieux from the University of Cambridge and were found to contain universal human experiences. They offer insight into how people coped with major life challenges and maintained connections during times of separation. Professor Morieux identified the crew members to whom the letters were addressed and conducted genealogical research into their lives. Hungary and Poland seize the EV moment. Bloomberg. Hungary and Poland are leading Europe's transition to electric vehicles, EVs, attracting significant investment from China and South Korea. Hungary has secured an estimated €20 billion, $21.5 billion, of EV-related investment, including a new factory from BYD, while Poland is home to LG Energy Solutions' lithium-ion battery plant, the largest in Europe. Meanwhile, the Czech Republic and Slovakia have struggled to attract similar levels of investment, raising concerns about their ability to transition to EVs. Volkswagen has said there is no business rationale for setting up battery production in the Czech Republic. Tesla to raise Model Y prices in China following style revamp. Bloomberg. Tesla is set to raise the prices of its Model Y variants in China following a refresh of the car in October. The timing of the price changes has not yet been decided. Tesla has previously lowered prices in China to stimulate sales, but has recently made upward adjustments as well. The Model Y is one of China's best-selling electric vehicles. The updated version includes new features such as ambient lighting, upgraded finishings, and a new wheel design. A handsome boy from Australia, an invite for the president and a refusal to budge on some issues. The key takeaways from Albanese's China visit. ABC. Australian opposition leader Anthony Albanese has concluded his visit to China, aimed at improving relations between the two countries. During his trip, Albanese met with Chinese President Xi Jinping, who expressed his gratitude for former Australian Prime Minister Gough Whitlam's role in establishing diplomatic relations with China 50 years ago. Albanese also attended the China International Import Expo in Shanghai and held bilateral talks with Premier Li Qiang. While no concrete announcements were made, Albanese said that Australia and China had agreed on a joint outcome statement and practical steps to advance dialogue on climate change and trade. He added that progress had been made on lifting Chinese sanctions on Australian lobster and beef products. Albanese rejected the idea that Australia should act as a mediator between the US and China and said that Australia would not be defined by its differences with China. He also raised concerns about China's human rights record and the case of Australian writer Yang Hengjuan, who has been imprisoned in China for almost 5 years. Satterfield puts up 10 in Portland State's 62-55 victory against Air Force. Associated Press. Portland State defeated Air Force 62-55 in their season opener. Jarrell Satterfield led the Vikings with 10 points and 7 rebounds, while Kalen Allen and Isaiah Kirby each contributed 8 points. Bo Becker and Chase Beasley both scored 14 points for Air Force. Portland State will play against UCSB next, while Air Force will face LIU. Mokseka scores 16, Campbell takes down Navy 59-48. Associated Press. Campbell defeated Navy 59-48 in their season opener, with Gediminas Moksekas scoring 16 points for the Fighting Camels. Anthony Delorso added 14 points and Mason Grant finished with 11 points. Austin Inga led Navy with 8 points. Anti-junta forces claim capture of 1st District HQ in Myanmar coup fight back. South China Morning Post. Armed resistance groups in Myanmar have seized control of a district capital in the north of the country, according to residents and media reports. This marks the first administrative capital to be captured by the resistance forces since the military took power from the elected government in February. These loosely organized resistance groups, known as the People's Defense Force, PDF, have made alliances with armed ethnic minority groups that have been fighting for greater autonomy for over 50 years. The resistance fighters in Kholin are preparing to defend against further attacks from the military. Israel open to little pauses in Gaza fighting, not a ceasefire, Netanyahu. South China Morning Post. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls for a general ceasefire in Gaza, despite growing international pressure. Netanyahu said that Israel would consider tactical little pauses in the fighting to allow aid to enter or hostages to leave. Both Israel and Hamas have rejected calls for a ceasefire and continue to engage in conflict. The UN has called for an immediate ceasefire and warned that Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. The UN Security Council has failed to agree on a resolution on the conflict after more than 2 hours of discussions. That's all for today's news update, folks. I'm Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world. Let's take a quick recap of today's headlines. First up, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that Israel will maintain overall security responsibility in Gaza for an indefinite period after its war with Hamas. This indicates that Israel plans to retain control over Gaza, despite calls for a general ceasefire. In another story, letters from the 7 Years' War, written by loved ones of French sailors, have been opened for the first time after 250 years. These letters offer a glimpse into the universal human experiences of coping with separation and major life challenges. Moving on to electric vehicles, Hungary and Poland are leading Europe's transition to EVs, attracting significant investment from China and South Korea. Hungary has secured billions of euros in EV-related investment, while Poland is home to the largest lithium-ion battery plant in Europe. Tesla is set to raise the prices of its Model Y variants in China following a refresh of the car. The Model Y is one of China's best-selling electric vehicles, and the updated version comes with new features and design elements. Australian opposition leader Anthony Albanese has concluded his visit to China, where he met with Chinese President Xi Jinping and attended the China International Import Expo. While no concrete announcements were made, progress was made on climate change and trade issues. In Gaza, Palestinian civilians are fleeing the combat zone on foot or by donkey cart as Israeli ground forces encircle Gaza City. Over 1.5 million people have been displaced by the war. In sports news, Portland State defeated Air Force 62-55 in their season opener, while Campbell defeated Navy 59-48. And finally, armed resistance groups in Myanmar have captured their 1st district capital in the fight against the military junta. These groups have made alliances with ethnic minority groups fighting for autonomy. That's all for today's news update. Remember, folks, it's always important to stay informed and engaged. So, what are your thoughts on today's stories? Do you have any questions? Let's hear your ideas. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.